But before we even get into that, I just want to go like back in the day, Spencer. Like, what was growing up like in cold, cold as fuck Canada, which I know it's cold today. But what was it like growing up where you were?
Well, that's why I do a lot of the things that I do, and that's why I've been doing them for a long time. Because even though I have a great group of friends around me and a great group of people around me that have always been there and will always be there for me, it wasn't easy being handicapped, and things like that. Because you're always constantly reminding people that, hey, I may be in a wheelchair, but my chair does not define who I am by any stretch of the imagination.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Paint Method podcast. Feels good to say that. We're just getting into this, and I got to speak to one of my first podcast guests ever in the short history that I've been doing podcasts, which is right now. This gentleman who's from Canada, based in Toronto, I hate to say that he's just an inspiration because he is. I would say that the word that best describes him is a fighter. He just keeps pushing and going no matter what. I would describe him as maybe a speaker, actor, author. He says he's a sit down comedian, which may make sense later. And I don't think that there's enough titles. I would also add charismatic character to all this. He stars in Netflix's show Designated Survivor with the star Kiefer Sutherland, and also he has this infectious spirit, and I understand why more and more now why so many entertainers and celebrities are drawn to him because his approach to life it breaks all barriers, and I think it's a story that we can all really truly be inspired by, but also to inspire us to want to keep fighting forward as well. So also he has a podcast, the Isolation Series. Please welcome one of our first guests to the Paint Method podcast, Spencer Miller. We are all on our paint journey, but where are we now? And where do we go next? This is how passion, action, intent, new, teach. This is the Paint Method. All right, Spencer. So I just went down your titles. I gotta tell you again because I'm just curious. I have a question to kick this off.
Yes.
Speaker,
Yep.
author,
Yep.
actor,
Yes.
sit down comedian, which is from your
Yeah.
IG bio. I'm just curious, which title do you feel most connected to?
All of them.
Yeah.
Because all of them represent a certain side of me that make me who I am. And so that's what I love about doing all the different things that I do. Is it allows me to intersect every aspect of myself into everything that I do.
I could definitely see that because we've spoken before. I mean, briefly, but it easily was like a 30-minute conversation, and you have this infectious spirit. I know you know this, but I can see why you need several outlets to get that energy out to the world. But like, what was your first moment where you realized, like, you know what, I have a special effect on people?
Well, I was doing a speech for the Cerebral Palsy Foundation of Ontario way back in 1990, and the Prime Minister at the time, Brian Mulroney, was in the audience. And after that speech, he came up to me and said, "Hey, we need your extremely attractive, charismatic, smart self to represent the country and handicapped individuals. Do you mind?" doing it. And when the Prime Minister of Canada asks you to do something, unless they're an idiot, like certain people in the United States have been in the last several years, you say yes. So obviously, I did that, and then I ended up working with some great organizations, which launched me into what I've been doing. But I knew that I had the ability to make an impact on people the first time I took a stage and had to do a speech or had to entertain people, because feeding off of that crowd, very much like yourself, in whatever atmosphere it is that we do it, whether it be an NBA halftime show or the 2019 NBA Finals in Toronto, where you and I met originally, or
Yeah.
whatever they may be, or before the hottest band in the land, Kiss, takes the stage, or whatever. You know, every audience gives you a different emotion, and you're able to tap into that and feed off of that more oftentimes than not.
Yeah, being live in front of an audience, I've always told people this, that it is the highest of highs, and you cannot compare to it, anything else to it, which is why I understand why some people, not everyone, but some people, when they're off stage, that they need some sort of like stimulant to make them feel like that again. You get the bug. So you just mentioned the hottest band in the land, Kiss. What you know my connection with them. I went on tour with them for in 2019. But how do you know the band, or what was your connection with them?
So in 2000 and I want to say four, the Molson Indy Toronto was one of the biggest IndyCar races on the circuit, and at the time, Gene Simmons was the celebrity marshal, and I was doing some things like for the Molson Indy back then, and sort of being a conduit between myself and some of the drivers and a bunch of different people. And I just met Gene, and we instantly connected because of my, as he puts it, gregarious personality. And ever since then, whenever Kiss is on tour, they make sure that good old Spence is there to be with them as often as I humanly possibly can be. And you know this, both Paul and Gene and Tommy and Eric are all great, great individuals. And to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know if you feel the same way that I do, but I feel really bad uh, for them, specifically because they were getting ready to do their 19th farewell tour right before this pandemic hit. They were going to go on their last leg, and you actually believe them this time because they're 70 years old plus, most of them at this point. So taking 2 years away from that, yes, it is rejuvenating for a lot of people, but not when you're in your 70s more oftentimes than not.
I have to say, I saw them perform every single night, and I would go out and watch them because they're one of the they're such a great inspiration for any live performer, especially in just a rock and roll realm, and also the theatrics. But I would go watch them and take notes, and I was always taken back by the fact that I'm tired at like 39 now. I'm tired after, an hour or so of doing anything, let alone them. They're doing these 2 hour shows. And so, it, part of that too is because, a lot of people don't know this, some may, but Gene and Paul specifically are pretty much sober. They never really did drugs or alcohol throughout their career.
No,
And,
because Ace and Peter did enough for about five
yes.
people during that time.
Exactly. The Ace and Peter did enough for the entire band and several bands, but I do think that that's part of the contribution of them being able to still do it like they do. Just not partaking in things and having that self discipline. But either way, it's paying off for the 19th farewell tour that I'm not mad at because I was able to hop on that train late. So you know
Yeah.
there's you're on like one of the biggest shows on Netflix, and I've seen this show. And but before we even get into that, I just want to go like back in the day, Spencer? Like, what was growing up like in cold, cold as fuck Canada, which I know it's cold today. But what was it like growing up where you were?
Well, that's why I do a lot of the things that I do, and that's why I've been doing them for a long time. Because even though I have a great group of friends around me and a great group of people around me that have always been there and will always be there for me, it wasn't easy being handicapped, and things like that. Because you're always constantly reminding people that, hey, I may be in a wheelchair, but my chair does not define who I am by any stretch of the imagination. Unfortunately, with it being 2022, you would think society would have gotten better over the years as opposed to, 1987, 1988, something like that. But the harsh reality of it is, more oftentimes than not, it's worse now than it ever has been, which is really sad. Because again, take 5 minutes to talk to me, and you realize that my disability is just a situation that I was dealt early on in life. And, yes, I have a wheelchair that gets me from point A to point B. And yes, I need help throughout the course of a day with certain activities and things like that to make sure everything gets done correctly. But you can say that about anybody. You can say that about David Garibaldi. You can say that about whoever you want. It's just a whole perception thing. And so it's been my life's mission to, dispel some of these stigmas that come along with being in a wheelchair.
You know what's amazing about that is how easily you could have retreated back. You could have taken words, literally when you knew in your heart they weren't true. And instead, that life mission and that purpose and that intent you've given yourself has opened up so many more doors for relationships, friendships, and even opportunities, for yourself as well. But you said that if someone would talk to you for 5 minutes, they would know that there's no room to judge. They don't need that much time to know that. I think within 30 seconds, you realize that you're a leader. You lead with like this. There's a term, je ne sais quoi, but I think it's even for you. There's a momentum in how your presence is. And so, was there a transition where early on you didn't have the confidence that you have now, and like pre that, or was the confidence always there?
Well, my early on, I had multiple teachers and things like that come up to me and say, "Hey, you should not go past elementary school because you're not going to amount to anything, and it's not really worth your time, and different things." So I had to deal with that coming from a principal and a vice principal of my elementary school back in the day, if you can believe it. Um,
I can't
and my
believe that. No.
and I had some special ed teachers because when you're at a school and you're in a wheelchair, they automatically think that you deserve to be in some special ed and whatever as well. So they weren't very helpful early on either. But then I went to high school, and that's where the confidence really started to change in terms of what the narrative was. Not so much, from a teacher's perspective, because I still had people coming up to me being like, you should do this type of work instead of the actual work that we're doing in class, and trying to belittle me still and things. But what changed for me in high school was within the first day of being in high school, I made the conscious decision to become friends with every member of the senior football team. So I became friends with every member of the senior football team and ended up being an assistant coach on the senior football squad right from the get go, even in grade 9. So people knew not to fuck with me because I had some of the biggest and most intimidating looking guys having my back, and things like that. So
Yeah, and that probably, would you agree that that sort of set the momentum for even how you make connections now? It's almost like, uh, there's, yes, it's like you've people have got your back, but also I feel like that you just you hold that in your heart regardless whether someone has your back or not. That you're the confidence comes from your what you're capable of, rather than just who you know.
100%. But I also think it's important to treat people the same way, no matter who they are. And you know this from all the connections that you've been able to be afforded throughout your work in recent years, and things like that. And it's the same for me. You and I've talked about this offline. There are so many people, whether it be in sports or entertainment or whatever the case may be, that I'm really, really good friends with. That I'll just sit there and bust their chops, and we'll swear at each other, and it'll just be like a normal conversation. And some of those things are the most hilarious to me because, a lot of these people have, these personas, and things like that, where everybody's like, oh my God, it's this person, blah, blah, blah. And rightfully so in a lot of cases because they've worked very hard to get that. But you get them behind closed doors, or you get them on a one-on-one FaceTime, and we all put our pants on one leg at a time, and they love busting their friends' chops just like anybody else. And I think that that's been a real benefit to me as well throughout the years.
But I think you also do a great job of opening that door for that, because I think most people may be sensitive to like not want to say something to to offend, or and that's the case across the board with just random people on the streets. But you just like go for it, and I absolutely love that. And I've like I know I'll grow to love that even more as you bust my chops too.
Absolutely. And ladies and gentlemen, it's important for you to know this. And that is that David and I were very fortunate to meet each other during game 3, I believe it was, of the NBA Finals in 2019. Originally, when the Raptors were taking on the Golden State Warriors, he came up to do the halftime show on that day. And David did not actually remember our initial conversation, but we ended up connecting on that day, and chatting 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so before that game. And we just had that connection, and we lost touch for a couple of years. But then I reached out, and I was like, hey, here's the deal, blah blah blah, this is what I'm thinking. And here we are now, because it's one of those situations where when you connect with somebody, it doesn't matter how long a period of time goes by. When you reconnect with them, it's like you just talked to them 5 minutes ago.
Absolutely. I would say that relationship building has lend more of I say success loosely because it's different for all of us, but the biggest opportunities I think that have come to me at least have been either through long relationships or because of philanthropy. Some sort of form of giving back.
Yeah.
You've been able to represent you know people throughout your country. What's a message you would say to people that are listening right now of what's the biggest misconception about people who are handicapped or have any disabilities?
Well, I still get people who come up to me almost on a weekly basis, at least once or twice, whether it's in the grocery store or in like a shopping mall or whatever the case may be. And they'll come up and they'll be like, "Hi, how are you? Can I get this for you?" And I'm like, "Hey guys, I'm handicapped. I'm not an idiot. Uh, please don't talk down to me like I'm 5 years old." Uh,
Yeah.
uh, and so that is one of the most preconceived notions is, again, talk to somebody for 5 minutes, assess the situation, and after that 5 minutes, if you need to assess the situation a certain way, then you can do it then. But don't go into a thing and automatically start talking to them like they're an idiot.
Well, usually when people talk to me for 5 minutes, they're like, "Oh, he's definitely an idiot," and then they move on. So
Yeah, yeah. They're like, it's better when he's just in front of a canvas doing painting. So we'll just shut up and let him do his thing.
yeah, they're like, "Just go." And then here I am doing a podcast now, and they can't get rid of my voice.
Right.
So I want to just fast forwarding your journey because the title of this podcast is the Paint Method. So it's about passion, action, intent, new and to teach, and in that order is how we bring ideas to life. It's how we build our creative journeys. And when you started doing acting and opportunities for acting started to present themselves, that seems like something that if you weren't doing acting your whole life, it's a new challenge for yourself, or it's something that may feel uncomfortable at first. Uh, what was that process like to go from, really doing what you were doing before, being a representative and probably, I'm assuming, speaking, and going behind the camera like that? That's a really crazy transition, or maybe it wasn't.
It really wasn't because, like I said at the beginning, it allows you to marry all those different skills. And so, yes, when you're filming a TV show or a movie, there's a lot of hurry up and wait. And trust me, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot of hurry up and wait. So you have to be really, really patient on those long days where it's 14, 16 hours on set. But doing the actual work and doing the actual scenes in front of the camera is not too dissimilar than when they say, "Ladies and gentlemen, David Garibaldi," and that switch goes off in your head for that period of time, whether it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or half an hour, or however long you have in front of that crowd. But for that time, your entertainment switch goes off that a few of us have, and you just know how to go into that mode. So that's how I feel about being in front of the camera. It's very similar to being on a stage giving a speech, or being on a stage doing a stage play or a musical or something like that, just on a bigger scale.
Yeah, I believe that true performers understand that because whatever's gone on your life before that moment, you still carry it up until they say your name, and whether it's time to go on set or time to go on stage, and there is this switch. Like before I go out, say for if it's a halftime, and I start to take in the fact that there's 10,000 people plus watching this, and then on NBA Pass as well, I started getting nervous right before, and then no lie, I'm walking out there, I'm in the middle of the arena, and then it's not until they say my name, and I've always tried to compare that to skydiving, and I've never skydived, but I'm just assuming that that's what it's like, and I think that's why I don't want to skydive. Is when you get in that plane, you go up there, they open the door, there's only one way out, and that's how it feels performing and going on stage. Is that door opens, they say your name, and there's only one way out.
100%. I agree with you in terms of there's been many a day where I have felt like absolute shit for a myriad of different reasons leading up to a big speech that I need to do in front of thousands of people, or an introduction that I need to do in front of thousands of people, and I'm feeling like shit. And I'm even feeling like shit in the wing right before I go on. But as soon as they're like, "Spencer Miller," that switch goes off. And for that period of time that I have to go out there and do my job, it goes away and the performer in me kicks in, like you. Whereas as soon as I get off stage, my body goes, "Okay, you're done doing what you need to do now. You can go back to feeling like shit like you were before."
For people that haven't been able to experience that, you've done things to put yourself in the position to experience being able to perform. For people that maybe haven't had the opportunities, but they may possess that skill to perform, or even a skill to do anything. What type of situation would you suggest people can maybe put themselves into to just feel what it's like to be a little uncomfortable and just see if they're made for something, or even just to have a moment to grow?
Well, I mean, the best example that I can use in every day is if you've been asked to be part of a wedding party in some capacity, shape, or form for a friend, and your friend is like, "Hey, I want you to do a speech at my wedding." You know, you get up there and do a 10-minute speech at the wedding reception, and it gives you sort of the feel of what it would be like for us to get in front of thousands of people. I mean, not on the same scale, but it'll still give you that same type of vibe.
Yeah, just don't drink as much as I did before I did my friend's speech at his wedding. No, it was a hot mess, but no, that's a very practical way to approach it. So,
Uh,
uh,
this,
so what was
which
that?
I just need to tell you this story quick.
Yeah.
So for my senior prom in high school, uh, um, like we had it at this converted railway station that turned into a banquet hall. Beautiful old place, and there was a beautiful old staircase at the front of it, and there was a handicap ramp on the side of it. So myself and my date Jamie showed up at this thing, and she was like, "Okay, I'll meet you at the top of the stairs." And I was like, "Okay, great." So I go to the side of the building where the ramp is, go up the ramp, and at the top of the ramp, there's a group of these drunk people already standing in front of me to exit the ramp, and I'm like, "Excuse me, guys, nothing. Excuse me, guys, still nothing." So I'm like, "Fuck this shit," and so I start going around them, and as I start going around them, one guy backs into my driving arm, jerks my driving arm in the opposite direction, and I fall down half of the staircase in front of the banquet hall, and my chair falls on top of me because I'm still belted into my chair at the time, and so it took three or four cops to lift me in my chair back up, and my date had just watched all of this happen in front of her, and things like that. And keep in mind that it was my senior prom, so they were asking me, "Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I go into total guy mode, and I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, no problem, I'm fine." And we go in and we have the prom, and then at the end of the prom, like the pain starts to set in and everything like that. I find out that I cracked three ribs,
Oh my
and
God.
part of my shoulder, and for the next like 2 or 3 weeks, I couldn't really move without being in pain or anything like that. But that's a story for you right there.
Wow, that's crazy. How long was the recovery for something like that?
9 weeks.
Jeez. Knock
Yeah,
knock on wood. I don't want to experience. I know that pain had to be ridiculous. I
it
can't even
was.
imagine that.
No, and
Now,
if
no.
my date,
Oh yeah,
full
go ahead. Go
disclosure,
ahead.
if my date in full disclosure was not nearly as hot as she was, I probably wouldn't have dealt with it the way that I did. But we all have to make sacrifices.
You were in true guy mode then, for sure, for sure.
Yes, yes.
What would you say that that was one of the most painful moments in your life, or do you think you experienced something else where it was like, whether it was physical or emotional pain?
Well, that was one, and then one time my brother, as brothers do, we decided that we would play WWF wrestling, uh, um, and we had one of those sunken in living rooms. So like you had like two or three steps coming off the kitchen into the living room, and so I was watching TV one day, and my brother, in all of his wisdom, decided that he would stand at the top of the stairs and be like Superfly Jimmy Snuka and do a Superfly Jimmy Snuka onto me uh, from the top of the stairs down into the living room. Fine, whatever. Brothers do that. Except my brother jumped, and he totally missed and kneed me in the face, and like
Oh,
my started gushing blood and everything like that. But we all deal with stupid wrestling situations like that when we're growing up, and so that was one right there that sticks out to me too.
So the lesson learned was don't wrestle with your brother anymore after that.
Correct. There was another time that right before I had to do one of my surgeries, like 2 days later, my brother put me in uh, a sharpshooter, which was made famous by Bret the Hitman Hart, also Canadian, um, and he ended up tearing part of my quad. And so 2 days later, when I went in for my surgery, my doctor was like, "You also tore part of your quad, so we now need to fix that too." So, yeah,
And full
good.
circle, you have done stuff with the WWE, and you've got some wrestler friends now. So tell your
Yes.
brother to watch out.
Yeah, I love the WWE guys. They have brought me in and treated me nothing short of spectacular. And it is my hope that either this year or next year I will be the recipient of the Warrior Award, which is an award that they give out at their Hall of Fame ceremony. So keep your fingers crossed for me there, because that'll be a huge accomplishment. I've always been a sucker for wrestling, going back to the Macho Man Randy Savage, Hulk Hogan Mega Power days and stuff like that. So
No, likewise. I mean, growing up, I was a huge WWF at the time, WWE fan. I mean, we watched everything from Royal Rumbles to WrestleManias and even just like the weekly shows. So, you know,
I don't know about
oh,
you. I don't know about you, but like I loved the Attitude Era. That was my favorite era of wrestling because of Stone Cold and The Rock and all of that. But also like you got to like see some interesting stuff. On a weekly basis that you wouldn't get a chance to normally see these days because of the way that societal climate is and everything like that. But I remember having a huge crush on like Tori Wilson and back in the day Sable and things like that. But those were some good memories.
if you haven't watched it already, there's an amazing documentary about Stone Cold Steve Austin on, I think it's like A&E or something like that. They did a
Yeah, it's
biography
called
series.
Biography. Yeah, and they did one on him. They did one on Roddy Piper. They did one on Macho Man, and they did Andre the Giant and a couple of others, and it was spectacular.
They did an incredible job. Not only did I learn more about Stone Cold Steve Austin, and really it was like it was painful because you could see this guy just hurting to bring his dream to life. It was just like his family, his body. I mean, he was putting himself through it to for success. Now he's a forever legend, and I think the lesson learned there was like at what cost. What does it cost to be successful? So do you
And I
feel
know
like you
that
make any major sacrifices to pursue your dreams at this moment? Do
all
you
the
feel
time,
like you're missing out?
not necessarily missing out, but something that I don't normally talk openly about, but I'm gonna do it here on your podcast for only the third time in my entire career, and that is about 20 years ago or so. I went to bed one night and woke up the next morning, and ever since then, I haven't been able to eat or drink virtually anything, with the exception of very few things, without it going through my system remarkably
Wow.
fast. And I've seen, 7 different specialists and had over 200 blood tests and things like that, and had every oscopy you can think of and stuff shoved everywhere that it can be shoved in order to try and figure it out, and nobody has been able to figure it out. So when I'm going and doing a speech, no matter who it's for, whether it's sports or entertainment or everyday corporate or whatever, I have to go that entire, day without eating until I'm done doing what it is that I'm doing, just so that I make sure nothing happens before or during one of my speeches. So, the audience wouldn't know that or anything like that because I do a good job of doing my job and learning how to deal with it regardless. But when you're working on set for 15 hours a day and have to remember dialogue and things like that, it becomes increasingly difficult when you don't get a chance to eat until the very end of the day and things like that. So that is a huge sacrifice that I'm still dealing with on a daily basis for myself.
I mean, I can't even imagine, what that's like. Not only what that does to your spirit as well, but I think that's also what makes you so much more of an inspiration because of everything that you go through on a daily basis to still pursue the things that you enjoy and love. That's without even knowing that I was already inspired, but even just, and I'm sure there's so much more. We see people, doing what they love, and we think that they're shielded by struggle or shielded by things that are they didn't ask for, they're thrown at them, and they know exactly how to navigate it. But we really don't. We don't know how we navigate struggle until we're in it, and clearly you keep moving forward no matter what.
Yeah, and it's important to know that like we're all human. And in Canada yesterday, it was National Mental Health Day for the 12th year in a row, called Bell Let's Talk Day, where they raise a lot of money for mental health and raising awareness for mental health. And I'm a huge advocate in saying no matter who you are, no matter how much success you've been fortunate to have in your career and in your life, you should not be ashamed of saying, we all go through difficult times, including myself. Uh, um,
I'm right there
that
with you.
that there's at least 1 or 2 times a week where I want to punch a wall or like throw my hands up in the air and wave them like I just don't care, like the old hip hop song said. And you get very depressed on those days for different reasons, for your physical ailments, and you're like, man, why can't we get to the bottom of this and why can't we figure it out? But it is those people that you surround yourself with, and that I'm fortunate to surround myself with, you included in that, that allow me to get through the day to day struggle and the day to day things. Because, yes, I'm very proud of everything that I've accomplished in my life and my career, but I'm not ashamed to admit that I do have my battles, not only physically, but mentally on a weekly basis. Because there's no way in my mind that I should defy medical logic and have had been dealing with this now for 20 years, but nobody's been able to figure it out yet.
Yeah, it's not holding. I don't ever perceive it, holding you back. But in the event that it ever does, I'm always here if you want to send a text or call. Because similar, I deal with things personally as well. I think the past maybe 3 4 years, I've privately gone through some of the most difficult times in my life, and most people would never know. And I remind myself this, and when I go through difficult times, whether it's mentally, spiritually, or with anything else, is I try to grow in compassion for people that are going through something similar or even worse, and knowing
Yeah.
that it can be worse, and that at least I get to fight today. And that's what I just remind myself.
Yeah, man, and that's why like lots of people are like, "Hey Spence, how can you stay so positive?" Or "Hey Spence, how can you continue to give off such a positive message in your speeches and anytime that you go and introduce, a act or whatever the case may be?" And it's because life is too short. If you let it consume you, that's exactly what it'll do. So every day we fight, we get up, we're thankful for the things that we're thankful for, and we're thankful for the people that we have around us and choose to have around us, and we keep moving forward. You and I talked off air about how fortunate we both are to have some of the great people around us that we are able to have and able to joke and laugh with. And it's those small things that really help us get through, sometimes.
Yeah. People, we shared it in your intro, but I mean, people don't know I don't think they really understand the reach that you've had throughout your life. I mean, we talked about some, which was, you've connected with people from Michael Jackson to
Yeah.
Princess Diana, David
Yes.
Ortiz, the new baseball Hall of Famer.
Yes.
I mean, the list goes on. One of my favorites, which we have another connection with, is it's this show, Designator Survivor, the star Kiefer Sutherland. I just want
Yes.
to how so Netflix is huge. Like, there's one thing to have like tens of millions of people watch you. I'm assuming it's in the hundreds of millions of people that watch and stream these shows. But how did that opportunity come about, to appear on it, to act, and then obviously, just the time you spent with Kiefer?
Well, when they were starting to film Designated Survivor in Toronto, I met Kiefer, and we started talking, and he's like, "Hey, man, I think that this would be a great opportunity to have you come on the show." And I was like, okay, yeah, great, because we'd been talking about that sort of in passing previously. Because, like I said, in entertainment and in film and television, you get a lot of people that act like they're in a wheelchair, but they're not, in fact, in a wheelchair, except for a couple of people like R.J. Mitty, who has the same disability that I do, that played Walter Jr. in Breaking Bad alongside Bryan Cranston and things like that. But a lot of individuals play the fact that they're in a wheelchair and not actually are in a wheelchair. So it's important, or it has been important to me over the years, that yes, not every handicapped person should be given the opportunity to act, because not everybody can act. But those people that can act, like myself and a whole group of other individuals similar to me that can act, should be given the opportunity to have mainstream auditions and things like that. So I sat down with David Guggenheim, the creator of Designated Survivor, and Kiefer, and within a 3.5 hour meeting, we created my character of Brian Marcus, the head of the Environmental Protection Agency, and everything like that, and that's how that happened. And working with Kiefer is definitely an interesting experience in itself, because that guy has a lot of energy.
I'm sure he does. I'm sure he does. I'm sure he had a great time out there in Toronto. And I share this with you offline, but I'll share it with those that are listening and watching this. But early in my career, maybe 2008 or 9ish, I was doing a performance in LA at the time it was called LA Live, and
For Luke
it
Robitaille, correct?
it was a fundraiser for Luke Robitaille, legendary hockey player, and the biddings of his portrait that I painted started. Went from a couple thousand to like five to 10 plus. Eventually, it's in the 20-ish thousand-dollar range, and there's a winner. And then I go and I say, hey, I would love to meet the winner. So like, cool. So I go out there. They walk me to the gentleman's table. He stands up, reaches out to shake my hand, and I'm like, it's Mr. 24. This is crazy. So we got to talk just briefly, but he owns a massive portrait of Luke Robitaille. So he's a huge hockey fan, and I'm sure a friend
Yes,
of his as well.
yes, he is. We There's a lot of fun stories I could share that Kiefer, I'm sure, would not appreciate. But let me
Yeah,
just
we
tell
don't need
you,
to share them here. This is a new podcast, so I want to stay
yes,
on
yes,
here.
yes,
uh,
but definitely some memorable times with that guy.
That's amazing. Is there any other, what is the next, I guess, level for you? So in the paint method, at the very end, we talk about teach, and it's to impart knowledge on your journey, whether it's what not to do. or advice to give people what to do. What is the next part that you see in your journey as you continue keep moving forward and pushing?
Well, it's to continue doing what I'm doing, really, in terms of impacting people on a weekly, if not daily basis, in whatever way that I can. Because if you impact at least one person on a daily basis, then you know you're doing something right. And as long as I can continue to put positivity out there in many different forms, whether it be entertainment, sports, film, TV, whatever the case may be, or just everyday life. I'm all about that because I'm all about helping people and making sure that people are on the right path, whatever path that is. And if I can be some small part of that, I want to continue to do that as long as possible. Also, make sure that I go and continue to create some great memories for myself, like I have throughout my entire career, once this pandemic is firmly in the rearview mirror, hopefully in the not too distant future, and be able to get back out, with people like Kiss and Zach Brown and things like that, and do what I love to do in front of a whole bunch of people.
Well, I would say I think you're overachieving that goal already. It's if you think it's just one, I'll tell you, man, it is if not tens of thousands, hundreds, and I'm sure it's millions of people that you're inspiring every day. Is there
Well,
any?
and
Oh yeah, go ahead.
and I have to say thank you to you, because, like I said earlier on in the podcast, is that you are the quintessential example of what we were talking about a true friend. And even though it's been, or it was a long time before we reconnected, and it was like no time had passed. And I'm proud of you for continuing to do what you do and
Thank
exceed
you.
your expectations of continuing to push your ceiling and make those different connections, and things like that. So, anytime that I get to see any of your work, or support any of your work, I'm all about that because there are talented people who don't appreciate what it is that they get to do, and then there are people like you who appreciate it and show it through passion of life and passion of art every time out.
No, thank you. I mean, what keeps me going and what inspires me is connecting with people like you, Spencer. It's one, it's there's a like-mindedness of wanting to push through any struggle that we have on a daily basis, doing with a smile. I love that. I think in your bio you talk about that, talk about like just doing everything with a smile no matter what's going on. And I definitely can't wait to connect with you when we go back to Toronto, or really anywhere in Canada.
Uh, or even if I'm out your neck of the woods at the end of
Or that.
this, I definitely have to come out there and we have to have some good times as well. But also, I would be remiss if I did not tell people that, if you enjoyed this episode with David and I, David is going to be kind enough to be on my podcast here in the not too
Yes.
distant future as well. So you want to make sure that you tune into that. And I don't know if you mentioned it in the intro as well, but the podcast is called the Isolation Series with Spencer Miller, and you can find it on Podbean and YouTube and all of that. Just go to the Isolation Series. Doc.
All right. So, what are your social handles that people can follow you on your journey?
So if you go on to Instagram, it's at the Spencer Miller, THE Spencer Miller, and same with Facebook, is just Spencer Miller. I know I should be on Twitter, but I can't be bothered with Twitter, in full disclosure. So the best way to get a hold of me is Instagram.
Awesome, Spencer. You are beyond an inspiration. But I think after talking to you and now knowing more about you, I think you're a fighter, and I think that the energy that you have, and you do everything, it's inspiring. So, thank you for having this conversation with me today. I appreciate it, and I know we'll talk soon.
Yeah, and thanks for being able to reconnect. It feels like I said, like no time has passed, and I hope people really enjoy this podcast and this episode. And I can guarantee you this, that this is one of many collaborations yet to come between Garibaldi and myself. So you
Yes.
want to stay tuned for that, because we're going to do some good things here in 2022/2023. Some of them we know right now, and some of them we don't know at the moment, but I can guarantee you that it's going to be fun either way. And again, buddy, proud to call you a friend, and thank you for having me on the Paint Method podcast with you today.
Likewise, Spencer. Thank you. And yeah, we'll be doing your podcast next. So thank you, Spencer.
Absolutely, buddy.